Welcome to Introduction to Sociology. Today, what I'd like to do is review two of your major assignments this course to help give you a sense of what they'll be about, what's required of you, and how they fit into your coursework. So the two are the essay, and the first that you'll be responsible for is the article analysis assignment. So this is due Saturday, September 20th. So coming up fairly soon, and it's worth 50 points. But as you'll notice in your syllabus, the essay and the article analysis assignment comprise 30% of your grade. So they're important assignments. The purpose of this article analysis assignment is to recognize what we'll be studying in the events that surround us. Certainly many of the news stories that you will hear on the radio, that you'll read about in newspapers, can be understood from many perspectives, but sociology gives us a particular lens from which to view and understand social issues and social problems. So this is an opportunity for you to recognize that in the world around us and to apply sociological analysis and perspectives to understanding those events. And also there are elements of the assignment that help you to think critically about the information that you're reading, that you're receiving. And we'll do that not just with articles from newspapers, but in particular with this assignment. So I'm going to break down some of the steps for you of what's required. The first thing that you'll do, because this is an article from a newspaper, it won't be a journal article or a magazine article, but you will be choosing a national, reputable newspaper, and you'll choose a subject that is related to something that we've talked about in class. So it may be something that you've discussed through the forums, that is in your Moodle coursework, that's addressed in your readings, or you might have found yourself thinking about a current event and recognizing how sociology helps you to understand that event. So hopefully you all have by now a library card, a Shasta College library card. And the best way to choose, both to find and access a newspaper article is through the online library. There are instructions and links under the orientation materials, and I'll be posting an extra guide for using ProQuest, the ProQuest database and Newspaper Sources Plus. And that's easily accessed through the library through articles and databases. So you may have a particular issue in mind. You may have a particular current event that you've heard about or talked about that you'd like to explore online. Or you might have a more global search and see what comes up in some of those major newspapers. Again, like the New York Times, the LA Times, Washington Post, perhaps. And the instructions should help you to focus those. You want to choose something, ideally that's happened within the last year, maybe 2 years if it's something that's farther back. Go ahead and send me an email and we can talk about that. So in terms of looking for a topic, when you do the database search, I always have students tell me that they feel at a loss. They're not sure what they might be interested in. So listening to the news, if that's not something that you currently already do, helps. So that might be on TV. You might access, there are, I know, different social media or summaries of news, often from a comical or a particular political perspective, but it can give you an idea of what's happening. Reading your texts and materials, most of your texts and materials use a lot of different examples, and particularly contemporary examples that will also give you ideas. And as we continue, I'll plan some office hours online, and during that time we can, in small groups, or even larger groups, those who show up, we can share different ideas and discuss some potential foci for the topic. As is true with all of your assignments in the essays, you want to review the instructions carefully. Both this assignment and your final essay contain very detailed instructions, and that's intended to be a guide for you in helping you to be the most successful. You'll also be graded on completion of those instructions, so it's important to attend, make sure that you understand. So one of the instructions is that you'll have different sections in your paper in this article analysis. And the first is summary. So you would have the headline summary, and in 1 or 2 paragraphs, no more than 2 paragraphs, I'd like you to summarize the article. Much like in a peer-reviewed journal, you might find an abstract that gives you kind of a map of the entire piece. You're summarizing the main points in 1 or 2 paragraphs, and that's a skill that in itself that you're building, but you don't want to rewrite the article. You don't want 5 paragraphs, just 1 or 2, ideally 1, summarizing the article. Then you want to talk about the evidence that is presented. So are they using, what kind of evidence are they drawing on to support their idea or to present the news report? So sometimes that might be police reports. It could be talking about surveys or a research project that was conducted. It might be bystanders, people who happen to show up at an event. So you want to both say what is the evidence. Sometimes there isn't any, but you'll want to speak to that as well. And what's the quality of the evidence? So if it's a survey, typically there's information that tells you something about that quality, or you can make some inferences about the quality. So for example, a survey done by Mrs. Jones's 6th grade class would likely have a different weight or quality than a survey that's conducted by Harvard School of Public Health. Right? So there will be there should be information there to give you a sense of the quality and how much weight you should give it. And if it's not present, then you speak to that the evidence was missing or not conclusive, or there wasn't a lot of evidence from which to make a judgment. So you think about validity, bias, the kinds of skills that are assumed or presented. Next, you'll talk about the objectivity of the author. So by this, I don't mean the objective, what they were trying to do. You want to talk about whether the author, the person writing the piece, seems to be biased or taking or favoring a particular side or not. And there are many ways that this might happen. Often when I ask this question in class, students will say, I'll ask, how might you demonstrate bias towards one side or the other? And sometimes authors do that with pretty clear language, but often it can be more subtle, such as using different kinds of verbs to present the positions of other sides. So one side might be impassioned while the other side is riled up. And it might be subtle in terms of giving a lot more speaking time to one side or describing one side in more favorable light than the other. Or it might be discrediting or questioning remarks about one side only. So all of those factors, language, attention, credibility given, can all give you some information about your judgment, which is what you're presenting, your analysis and judgment of the objectivity of the author. The 2 remaining sections are a sociological analysis, and then you'll be analyzing using a theoretical perspective. Obviously, you haven't gotten to that section yet, but we will. And this piece comes soon after or 2 week study of those perspectives. So if there is a piece that you need to understand more about theoretical perspectives, please let's have that discussion. So the sociological analysis looks at, there's a lot of different ways to ask that question. It might be, what is sociological about this topic that you've chosen? Or what's important, what would be important to a sociologist? How is it related to the discipline, to what we're studying in the course? So it's not just that this deals with society, because most of the things that you find in the newspaper will deal with society or human interaction, but something more specific than that. What aspect of human interaction, or what of some of the concepts that we've reviewed to that point, which concepts does it relate to? And then finally, given your topic and the piece that you just reviewed, how might each of the 3 theoretical perspectives that we'll study, structural functionalism, conflict, and symbolic interactionism, what would each perspective be interested in knowing? As you'll see, each has a particular lens from which to view society and issues and problems. And I'll be sharing with you some of the kinds of questions that each asks. So if you were to look at this topic from each of the 3 perspectives, what would each be interested in? A couple of comments that will help you with your final essay as well is that you may find use of particular sociological concepts, and you'll want to define those using a sociological source. So there are concepts like culture or social control, or that might be defined differently if you were to look at it certainly in a Webster's or dictionary.com, or from a psychological perspective. So you want to use a sociological source for defining those. Your book is a great resource, and even if you choose to buy it hard copy, you can download it as a PDF and very easily search for those terms. And there's a social science dictionary.com. It's actually just socialsciencedictionary.com. And you'll want to cite any sources that you use, including the source of the article, using APA format. The formatting is in the instructions. I won't go over these all specifically. You will have a title page. One piece that I didn't put in this particular slide is that you want to copy and paste your article into the final page. You don't have to upload it to Turnitin separately. I've given you an icon, a Turnitin icon, so that when you upload your assignment, it automatically gets submitted that way. And I certainly, when I look at the originality score, I certainly look at specifics. So if your whole article is cited as being copied, of course I've asked you to do that, so I'm not going to be looking for that. In short essays, shorter essays like this one, you'll want to minimize your use of quotes, because you don't have a lot of space to work with. There's not necessarily a particular, what should I say, you might be able to deal with this in 2 to 3 pages. You can use a little more, but 2 to 3 pages should be sufficient for addressing these pieces. So now we'll move on to the final essay. We'll move back to the final essay. The final essay is due Saturday, December 6th, so you do have a while for that. It's weighted at 100 points, again, of that 30% for this section. And the main purpose of this is to reflect on your life, using what you've learned in the course, using your sociological imagination, which we're doing in the first 2 weeks, and to also integrate and apply some of the sociological concepts that we'll be learning. I do want you to know that we'll be having a reflection activity during one of the weeks, worked about 50 participation points, and to help prepare you to think about some of those concepts. I'll let you know a week before it's due. I'll put up instructions for that assignment fairly soon in the essays and assignment folder, but it will appear again in the week for which it was due. And after that's written, we'll be talking about and thinking about some of the concepts that we've learned that apply to your life, your particular situation. So what you'll be doing in this essay is to focus on some of the key people, situations, interactions, larger events, conditions, and messages that have influenced your decision to be here, to be enrolled in college, to be here at Shasta College. And the instructions contain lots of different questions under each of these different headings. You don't have to necessarily choose from all of these situations. You might have 3 or 4 of them. You'll be choosing 3 sociological concepts, but in preparing for the piece and when you do your reflection, it will be good to think about all of these areas. So in terms of people who influenced you, examples I've had from students are particular messages and examples or support that they received from grandparents or parents or siblings or friends. Those can be positive or negative, with the exception of support is generally positive. And it can be about the importance of college, what you can achieve if you've gone to college, about hard work and studying. But most of us can think about some people who have had an impact on our decision, sometimes by example and sometimes very directly. Another piece that we tend not to think about as much is the role of groups and organizations. So these can be schools or religion, other associations that we're involved with, sometimes more informal groups. And these can influence us in many different ways as well, in terms of preparation, talking about the idea of college, connection with particular colleges, connection with career ideas, or again, support, aid, a lot of different areas in that way. And I'll just, as we're reviewing these, part of this issue is that often we think about our decisions as being very individual based. That's what I wanted to do, or I've always thought that way. But actually, when we look at it from a sociological perspective, we can see that there were many of these shaping factors, factors that we'll be talking about in terms of social forces that help, as we'll see with the sociological imagination, shape, influence, nudge, sometimes limit the decisions that we do make on our own. So another area to consider when we're focusing on this question are particular situations and conditions. Those can be economic, they can be political, there can be things that happened within our particular family, sometimes in our community, and sometimes it can be much broader than that as well. So the questions in your paper will give you some additional ideas about that, about how to consider that. And then there are, for some of us, historical, social, or political events that we know have shaped our individual thinking. I know that the year I was born, there was a lot happening with the civil rights legislation. Martin Luther King was assassinated. JFK was assassinated. There was a lot of organization and activism and around that time. And I know that in my environment, those factors, although I didn't participate as a baby, um, uh, those factors, that environment, what was happening socially, did help to shape my outlook on life, on human interactions, on what it means to be socially engaged and socially responsible. So some of you may have events like that that happened in or near um, your formative years. And the last list might be particular values and interests. So there may be particular values in your life, in your family, in your culture, or beliefs that helped to move you in this direction. You'll be, after you answered those questions and reflected on them, you'll be choosing 3 sociological concepts and connecting each concept with a section or illustration from your life. So these should be concepts different from each other, so you wouldn't want to choose values and beliefs and you together as 2 separate ones. And for each concept, you'll want to define it, referencing your source, explaining the definition in your own words, and explaining why it's sociologically important or what it contributes to our understanding of sociology. So I'll post this as an example of your outline and how you might develop your piece. There's different ways to do it. This tends to be a good way, an introduction with a creative opening sentence, and then with a thesis statement that can be 1 paragraph. Then even in 1, maybe 2 paragraphs, having your sociological concept, define it, explain it in your own words, as if to someone not in the class, for example, and then why that concept is sociologically important, and then a couple of paragraphs to, and this part 1 is really that reflection, data that supports the concept. So why is the fact that your grandparents were so supportive because they had such a hard life and wanted to see something better for you, giving a clear example, illustration of what they did, and how that's connected to your concept. So there's a student example of 1 concept. This is in your instructions, but in this case she chose peer group. She defined it specifically here, and then she a little bit later spoke about it in her own words and talked about why it's sociologically important. And then she gave an illustration of how that related to her case. So in some groups, I think for this one, there were a lot of her peers that were parenting as teens, and that was something that she didn't want to happen for herself. And I'll be posting other student papers as well. So this piece is 4 to 6 pages in length. It includes a title page. I've given you some details about that. A reference page. Of course, it's typed and double-spaced. 1-inch margins and page numbers. It needs to be turned in at the correct time. Certainly want to check for spelling and grammar, and use the APA and APA formatting. And as we get closer, again, I'll have another office hour availability online, and we can arrange something on campus as well if that's helpful to some of you. So please, if you have any other questions, please let me know. Good luck as we begin.